Hey everybody, it's Peter, and this is the 2024 Yamaha R1, and it is the last of a legend. We know that the R9 is probably coming in to replace this, or maybe definitely coming in to replace this. I haven't read up on all of that yet. I'm dealing with what's current right now. But in this video review, what I'm going to do is give you a little different review than maybe you'll see of the R1 in other types of videos. What I'm going to do is compare this to probably what you may be driving right now, which is maybe more of a street sport bike compared to a super sport bike, because with this being the last year of this bike, it may be time to move up, and I'm going to try to give you a perspective of some of the things that are going to be different on a bike like this than they would be on a more street sport bike. Now, that may not be the full review you want, but here's the thing. I can probably answer the questions that you have about this bike if I don't answer them in this video, because I'm filming here at McLean Sports and they give me complete access to their entire vehicle lineup, not just Yamaha, but all the other brands that they sell as well. And we'll be comparing this bike to other bikes in the future, but more importantly, anything you want to know about this bike or anything in the Yamaha product line, I can make videos on it and come back and make more and more and more videos because of the access they give me. So I can take your questions in the comments section and turn them into videos for you, so that you'll have a true in-depth answer to the questions you have. So there's my pitch. If that works for you, make sure you subscribe. And again, if you're in New Brunswick, swing by McLean's. But let's start with this review now. So first of all, let's talk about what this is. This is a 4-cylinder super sport bike like they have always been. The leader bike is what this is, 998cc. And basically what the R1 is, along with some other competitors from other brands, is this is the pinnacle of their technology, because in the race bike world, you have to basically start with something that is somewhat road legal and turn it into a race bike. Now that's less true now than it really is now. The current race bikes are like, I don't know, probably $1 million bikes compared to this one. This is not the M model. That's one higher. There is one higher spec than this, but this is going to give every road-going rider everything they could possibly need on the road, and you can absolutely take it to the track. So there are a lot of pieces to this that you're not going to see. So one of the key pieces is an IMU. Basically, it's an inertial management unit. It's a 6-axis. Some of them have 4-axis in other types of bikes. What that means is it can sense if the bike is leaning left or right, if it's wheeling up or down, if it's sort of stopping, if the rear wheel's coming up, but also it can sense the twisting forces or the combination of any of those forces on there. So if your rear wheel's sliding out a turn or your front wheel's sliding out in some way, the bike can sense that, and through power modes, traction control, ABS modes, all kinds of things, all of those things can be sensed by the computer, and then the bike itself can help react to it. And what that means is that a modern super sport bike is much more controllable than previous generation super sport bikes. Now, you say that, but it's also incredibly powerful. It is in no way a beginner bike, and the naming of this is a little bit interesting, because Yamaha has in their super sport category an R3. And R3 is not 3 times the engine of this. This is not an R1 that's underneath. This should be the R10 if you were to actually put it in perspective. And it's just a completely different animal. So even though it goes R3, R7, R1 right now, that R1 is at the top end, not at the bottom end. It is a whole different animal. So we're gonna start at the front now. And again, we're gonna start comparing this to more of a street-going sport bike and talk about some of the differences, both the pros and cons that you'll get in a bike like this. All right, if you've seen my reviews before, you always see me start at the front wheel and talk about the manufacturer's intent. You can tell the manufacturer's intent for that bike by looking at the front wheel. And what you see here on these super sport bikes is you'll notice the brake to the wheel distance is very, very small. And actually that makes it tough to sometimes check the tire pressures on these bikes, because there's very little distance. A lot of people think that the wheel is a little smaller on a super sport bike. That's not the case. You have massive brakes, dual disc brakes, floating calipers. So again, these little sort of rivet type things in there give these floating calipers. Sometimes they're solid, but on most modern bikes they're not. So on a super sport bike, you've got the top level, and basically that allows this brake to expand and contract just a little bit as you have braking forces. Now, a lot of bikes have really good front brakes. The difference on a super sport bike is that they can stop from incredibly high speeds very aggressively over and over and over and over again. So what that means is great heat management, but you also need a very stiff everything. So what you have here is a radial mount. You'll notice here it's kind of mounted here and mounted here. This kind of Y shape in here is a radial mount brake. That's what you're going to see on high-end bikes. Now, some street sport bikes will have this because it's a cool looking style, but every super sport bike will have it as well. You'll also see the braided lines here. Now, my street sport bike has braided lines with radial mount as well. That's going to give you great feel, great control. It's just about every little minuscule thing having no expansion of the rubber brake lines, no flex anywhere at all to give you top-notch componentry. The other thing you're going to see on every super sport bike is upside-down forks. Again, some street sport bikes are going to have these upside-down forks, some are not. Upside-down forks are generally a little bit more adjustable. They give you less unsprung weight, and they give you more stiffness up the fork where it faces a lot of stress. So overall, what you're getting is the best of the best. Again, some street sport bikes will have that, but all super sport bikes are going to have this. And again, this is the top sort of trim of that. The other thing you're going to find here on a super sport bike that you're not going to find on a street sport bike is really sticky rubber. Now, sometimes that sticky rubber, you think, oh, I'll throw it on my bike and it'll handle just the same way. Sometimes that's true, sometimes not. The key with this rubber is you generally have to warm it up a little bit to get that really good stickiness. So sometimes a street sport bike can actually be more grippy at street speeds than a super sport bike. But once you get these tires nice and warm, they are very grippy. They still have tread, they're still road friendly, but they are a very grippy bike. And so the overall feel in cornering and braking from this bike is going to be exceptional compared to a street sport bike. And then there's a few other things at the front end that you don't see on a street sport bike, so we'll come around them before we go back to the engine. So looking above that front wheel, one of the typical things you're going to see on a super sport bike is a little different face. What they've been doing more modernly, we'll call it, on a sport bike, is giving you that ram air kind of situation here where the air runs through the center. So the highest pressure point on the bike is going to take air in and dump it in the engine. That's forcing air into the engine. Of course, more air, more power, that kind of thing. And then of course, just overall styling wise, you've got some cool things here. You've got the daytime running lights up here with your actual headlights down there. So instead of having a street sport bike where it traditionally has the light in the center, your headlights are actually separate, they're not on right now. And then you also want to minimize the aerodynamic drag. Everything on this bike is designed for aerodynamics. So we can look at the shape up close. Sometimes it might be better to see it off video for some of those things. But you'll notice that there's no stalks. So a lot of bikes will put the signals into the bodywork. This one here, they put the signals into the mirrors, and that's actually probably a really good place because it sets it out, makes it really obvious. But again, you're minimizing the aerodynamic drag to get your high performance. So I'm going to sit on this bike in a second to show you a couple differences there, but before we do that, I want to show you a few other things you're going to see different on a super sport bike versus a street sport bike. You're going to see aerodynamics again, the bodywork and the wheel that almost tucks in. I straighten the wheel out instead of the traditional tilt on the sort of tilt towards you on the kickstand. I straighten the wheel so as if it's going down straight on the road. So you've got that bodywork that's really close into the wheel there. And then you have a number of different things because aerodynamics is not just about your motorcycle, it's also about your body positioning. So your body positioning is going to tuck into that flat top of the fuel tank, allowing you to go into a full tuck position. So your body can sit there and go around there. We're going to take a look at the windshield. It bubbles out to go around your helmet, but that can create an uncomfortable seating position compared to a street sport bike. It's designed to be aerodynamically good and keep your center of gravity nicely with the bike. So speaking of center of gravity, you can see a modern bike does need emissions controls. A lot of modern street sport bikes are going to have a much larger exhaust to help minimize noise, but there's still some catalytic converter type stuff underneath here. You still have all that, and on most modern bikes they try to put that heavy metals, heavy type stuff down as low as they can for overall weight balance, and that's what you're going to find in this bike. Everything, although the engine is designed for power, everything is designed for a really good balance as well. That's going to be something that really makes it feel light and flickable in the corners. But seating position is going to be different. So let's look at that for a second. So I'm going to jump on this bike for you, and again, I'm around 6 feet tall, proportional 6-footer, so not always the exact. I don't know my exact inseam, so I don't know exactly how high and tall I am. But one thing you'll find here is I am still slightly tippy-toed on this seat. Now the seat here actually has some room for me to move back quite a ways and also up. So when I move up, then I can sit sort of in a street position. When I move back and go all the way back, I gotta be careful I don't drop the bike here. You can see that the handlebars, the clip-ons, are dropped lower. Traditionally on a street bike, they're set up higher. Higher is a more comfortable position and you can bend your arms to be in the tuck position. Here, you're automatically in that tuck position and you can come down even lower, but you can see that my arms are sort of 90 degrees with the road, so you're still kind of not fully, you're not bent beyond. You've still got full steering control in that tuck position. The windshield does bump up, sends things over my helmet, and this area here you can almost rest your chest on to stay really, really low. That is going to be an uncomfortable seating position if you're sort of a sport touring kind of rider, which is why you don't take this on necessarily too many sport tours. The other difference you see is my pegs are exceptionally high. So compared to a street sport bike where you might have them down here, you're now up here. Again, this is about, and my rear end is high. So that's placing all of my body up to have the curvature of my back to be aerodynamic. And then as far as my legs go, that's gonna keep my legs off of the ground to have sharper cornering angles. And that's one thing with a super sport bike. What feels like a casual turn on this bike will zip around corners because it really can lean a lot farther than a traditional street sport bike, and that's part of what makes the R1 so special. It is lightning fast in a straight line, but it is also incredibly good for cornering. Now, one thing you will find with the most modern super sport bikes, the steering lock to lock is not quite as broad as you would have on a street sport bike. So slow speed cornering is going to take a little bit of practice when you move from a street sport to a super sport like this. Let's move our way around here to some of the controls here and talk about some differences and some of the fun of owning a true super sport bike like this R1. So right now you're looking at the general cockpit area of the bike, and we're going to zoom in a second here. So this is a wide angle lens. It kind of skews the view a little bit, so don't take that too closely. Zoom in, and we're going to zoom in again. One of the keys of owning a super sport bike is a ton of adjustments in the suspension. So you got preload, rebound, and compression damping all set up at sort of the top of the fork here. You can really, there's just almost unlimited adjustment in a true super sport bike like this R1. What that's going to do is a couple things. First of all, it allows you on the track to tune in the cornering speeds, the type of, if it's a bumpy track or a smooth track, or there's certain types of corners or certain types of bumps you're having trouble with, it allows you to really tune it in. If you're going to move to this kind of bike, it's not really worth paying for all of this adjustable suspension unless you have some idea of how to do it. So in the future, I'll do a video on how to adjust your suspension, mostly with a street sport idea, but that'll give you some idea of what to do on the track. Generally, if you're on the track, you're well above my level and you probably already know what to do anyways. But again, if you're not going to be tweaking this, part of that is the fun of owning a super sport bike. You can kind of dial in the handling for the road, you can dial in the handling for the track. On a track, it's going to make a difference to your lap times, but on the road, it's just going to be something that's kind of fun to play with. So you have that. Now, speaking of lap times, let's take a look at the dash. Let's see if we can zoom in without the cut. We're going to have to cut it out just to get the angle right to get into that dash. So we'll turn it on here in just a second. Actually, let's do that right now. What you'll find here on the R1 is a fairly small by modern standards TFT display. Now remember, weight savings is a big piece of ownership of this bike. And I don't remember the exact weight of this. We can check it out, you can check the specs. But the point is, you don't need anything oversized. The goal here is to go fast, to keep things light, to keep things reasonable. But once you have the dash, you want a whole lot of information. And this bike has that. So one of the cool things I want you to sort of pay attention to is the very bottom here. Now again, TFT displays are hard to kind of film and get everything to focus on, but you've got your power modes, your traction control modes, you've got a number of different modes, including engine braking, all down there on the bottom. And you can see it's in mode A right now. So what I can do is switch from mode A, and you can see your mode B is power level is 2, traction control is 3, moving on from there. So mode C, power level is 3, power level is 4, again to mode D. So all of these things are adaptable at the flick of a button. So you can zip back up to mode A, have full power, have a traction control, and you can customize all these as you switch across. You can see I can switch just the power mode here, just the traction control, everything else through here, sort of the drive modes and everything else, all through there. So In mode A, if you want your power mode to be different, you can switch that. So everything is customizable, and that is pretty typical of a modern super sport bike. You'll also notice at the very top here, you have quick shifter up and down. That, of course, is very common on a modern super sport bike. On some street sport bikes, you're now getting that. A quick shifter, what it does is it forces you to pull the clutch. I'm using my wrong hand, but pull the clutch to get it into first gear. So you release that clutch, get it into first gear. From that moment on, you can tap your gear shift up or you can tap it down with your foot, and you don't have to use the clutch. On a super sport bike like this, it's going to give you tremendous control of your gear shifts to keep really smooth in the corners, but it also creates a lightning fast acceleration, because not only are you having something that revs very quickly, has tremendous power in the upper revs, but you're also able to really nail the shift at exactly the right point, both upshift and downshift, which saves you from rev matching on the way down. It saves you from clutching in, switching gears, and clutching out on the way up, which means you are going to be lightning quick. And of course, you also have a good gear shift indicator. You've got trip indicator, you've got speedometer, and of course, you've got integration with your IMU that's going to tell you different things about the bike. So again, we could dig into the dash a little bit further, but that's some of the differences on the dash side of a super sport versus a traditional street sport bike. So let's talk about this now, if it makes sense for you to move up. And that's going to be an individual decision, but again, this is the last year of the true R1, and what that means is it's the last chance to own a legendary motorcycle like this. So, especially new. So let's talk about that for a second. First of all, on a super sport bike, they have become less and less comfortable over time as they've become more and more focused. Again, your body position is about aerodynamics, to have your back kind of curled like the back end of most Teslas, to have that aerodynamics, but it's also about weight balance in cornering and everything else. So right away, you've got that as a piece of it, and they're not going to be comfortable like a street sport bike. But a modern super sport bike is far more approachable than super sport bikes of the past because of your electronic suite. You still have sticky tires, you still have a powerful engine, you still have amazing brakes, but you also have the electronics package with that IMU. It's going to sense every which direction you're doing, and it's going to do its best to assist you if things are going wrong. Now, in no way are those meant to catch you if you are an inexperienced rider. This is for an experienced rider, but being able to dial down power modes in certain driving situations, whether that's rain or whether that's just, you're getting used to the bike, or you're out on the country road and it's just, maybe you're intimidated by all that power, which, even I've been riding for a long time. I'm intimidated by the power of this bike. You can dial down that power mode until you're in a situation where you're ready to use it, whether that's a wide open road, whether that's a racetrack, whatever you want it to be. This is going to be a much more accessible bike. The other cool thing about the R1 is these 1000cc bikes used to be big and heavy. They are now as maneuverable as the old 600s were, which means you have a fully maneuverable sport bike with an insane amount of power. So it's up to you to decide if you want to be one of the last few people to get the brand new R1 before they change course and move to an R9. And we'll talk about that in future videos. But it is kind of intriguing to be able to own a legend, even if you've had only nothing but a street sport bike in the past. You do have to make some compromises, but you do gain a whole lot in this bike. So there's my kind of quick review of the R1. Again, it's a little different than maybe what other reviews are doing, but if there's information that you're not getting in this video or other videos, make sure you let me know, because again, McLean Sports has this in stock now. I can come back to it, you can do more and more videos. It's a really, really cool bike to see up close, really rare bike, and it could be yours. So again, let me know in the comments. Do me a favor, hit the subscribe button. We've got all kinds of Yamaha bikes. I don't just do super sport bikes. We did a Yamaha Bolt just before this, which is their cruiser, a lot like a Harley type bike. I will review everything they've got, make sure to give you the information that you want. And again, if you have questions, let me know in the future, and I'll get back to you in the future. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll talk to you in the next one.